All right, there was an article that came out a little while ago from the Wallstreet Journal that caused a big stink, obviously, in the UFO community, and it essentially said that it was the government that was providing misinformation, saying things were UFOs on purpose, disinformation, in order to throw people off the scent of technology that we were working on. Inside of this particular long article, it tracked how a lot of these things that were reported in the past as UFO sightings were indeed something completely different, not UFOs. And also cited very much so on the accounts of what former Arrow director Sean Kirkpatrick said, and took most of his stuff as fact. And they had they had talked about what had happened in the late 60s over the nuclear facilities, and pretty much said, well, Sean Kirkpatrick and others said this, so this is what it is. And there was never any follow-up, even though some of those people that were there had talked about, came out with statements saying, well, that's actually not what it is. Nobody asked our thoughts on this or my account of what happened there. So there was a counter article that just came out, and this is from the New York Times. I mean, New York Times, obviously, who famously had written that article about 2017. And it's presented in a very different point of view. And I want to read this because I even say it's not an opposing point of view. I shouldn't even say that. It is written in the vein of the way that, in my opinion, real journalists should be writing articles, because it presents itself as not matter of fact. It asks questions in general about things, and it doesn't just take the side of one particular area. And that was my biggest concern with the Wallstreet Journal piece, that it was so clearly biased in what the Sean Kirkpatrick narrative is, that it didn't try to say, well, this is what Sean Kirkpatrick told us. And then when we reached out to these people, they said this. They didn't even do that. They just presented his narrative, which is what they've done many times over. And it seems to blow back in their faces every time they do something like this. And it potentially seems to be doing that again from this article from the New York Times. But I want to read this article. I want to read this article through, and I'm going to read all the stuff that this particular gentleman says, and I want to get your thoughts on it, but here it is. This is from July 1st, and it says, did the deep state invent the UFO craze? So as you see there, again, this is from Ross Douthat, who he, again, is writing this in a you'll hear the point of view. The last few times I wrote about UFOs in the spring and fall of 2023, there had been a series of curious happenings, reveals, leaks, and would-be whistleblowing that convinced me that some group of people inside our government wanted Americans to believe that the national security state had secret knowledge about UFOs. This was a deliberate, circumspect take on an extremely weird situation, which had three notable features. First, the kind of people coming forward with claims and the footage and accounts of mysterious flying objects being publicized in this newspaper, among other places, were more serious seeming, more difficult to eye roll away than what we'd seen in prior eras of UFO enthusiasm. Second, the sudden bipartisan interest for senators and congressmen, not just eccentrics in the House of Representatives, but also figures like Senator Chuck Schumer, who was then the majority leader, and Senator Mike Rounds, Republican of South Dakota. It was real, substantial, suggesting that a bit more was visible behind the curtain than we knew. But third, at the same time, all the leaks and insider accounts fell consistently short of what UFO believers call expectantly disclosure, offering enough to feed speculation about secret government programs, but not nearly enough to overcome a basic skeptical default. At the time, I argued that all the high-level political and media interest was removing the impediment that many believers argue stands between us and the truth, the alleged fear among those with secret knowledge of being jailed or killed if they speak out. If would-be whistleblowers with national security backgrounds like David Grush, Lou Elizondo were hale and well, and in Elizondo's case, publishing a best-selling book, then surely there was no better time to deliver the supposedly world-altering truth. And if nobody stepped forward, well, you should be more inclined to assume that the truth was never really out there. 18 months later, as you may have noticed, no Lockheed Martin employees have brought forward detailed plans of the alien spacecraft hidden in their corporate vault, and no former heads of the Department of Energy have confessed to keeping a great bureaucratic secret hidden since the dawn of the atomic age. Instead, we've had more interviews and first-person accounts, but no actual disclosure. even of the Jeffrey Epstein or JFK files variety from a Trump administration that includes a few UFO curious figures in its ranks. And now, in a pair of articles last month by two Wall Street Journal reporters, we've been given one of the more comprehensive attempts at a non-ET explanation of where some of the weirdness originates. Relying heavily on interviews with Sean Kirkpatrick, who ran AARO, which is a Pentagon task force investigating UFO evidence, the reporters reveal several possible mythology forging projects inside the military-industrial complex, a combination of deliberate psychological operations aimed at covering up top-secret technologies, possible bureaucratic pranks, and hazing rituals that accidentally made mid-level personnel into UFO believers, and top-secret experiments that the government allows its own personnel to interpret as possible close encounters. The Journal reporters also follow Kirkpatrick through investigations that did not pan out. A purported piece of extraterrestrial material turned out to have prosaic origins. A claim about Russia reverse engineering alien technology probably originated in the Russian version of our own UFO disinformation. And a larger pattern emerged where evidence to support the whistleblower's theories appeared to vanish just as Kirkpatrick got close to it. What's useful about the Journal stories is that they're more capacious than some prior debunking explanations. For instance, certain skeptics pinned the recent wave of UFO-related governmental signaling on true believers who were inserted into the national security loop by Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, a UFO believer of some sort himself, and then who traded on those credentials to legitimate their theories. But as far as I could tell, this explanation did not do justice to the apparent scale of UFO believers within the government. Whereas what the Journal reporters suggest is that UFO belief could have been seeded in multiple different ways over many decades, creating not just a small group of obsessives circulating the same wild theories, but a broader culture in which both deception and misapprehension are at work, the former feeding the latter and the latter encouraging the former, such that parts of the national security state are conditioned to use aliens as cover for their secret operations, and other parts are conditioned to assume there must be something real there. This portrait of deep state deception and delusion hardly resolves that UFO question. It doesn't explain the weird aerial encounters that help touch off the current age of interest, encounters which are, as far as I can tell from the public and private information, still taken quite seriously as an unresolved problem by defense and intelligence officials. Nor does it tell us how to understand the phenomenon of personal paranormal encounters, the UFO as religious experience zone where aliens seem to play angelic or demonic or very adjacent parts. Nor should anyone assume that the debunking explanations filtered through Kirkpatrick and other sources to the Journal are themselves trustworthy. It is certainly interesting that the military sources are now saying that famous UFO incidents and nuclear bases in the 60s where glowing orange orbs appeared and nuclear weapons were disabled were actually top secret tests of the effects of electromagnetic pulses on America's nuclear arsenals. Should the people who actually experienced those incidents and spent years trying to figure out what happened take this new explanation as gospel? I would say probably not. But parsimony is important. It could be that sometimes the military-industrial complex uses UFOs as cover stories for secret projects, and sometimes use secret projects as cover stories for actual encounters with non-human intelligence. It could be that the Journal's military sources intend to pile disinformation atop disinformation. But when you combine the evidence that UFO stories frequently have been used as disinformation with the failure of would-be whistleblowers to make good on their promise of proof, it's understandable if you assume that any given insider story of secret UFO knowledge probably originates in cover-ups and psyops, as opposed to the X-Files possibility that all the elements of the UFO question are intimately connected, that some group in the government knows what the strange aerial encounters represent and how they fit together with abduction narratives, and, by the way, also have an alien spacecraft in a hidden hangar somewhere. But defaulting to the PSYOP explanation doesn't just leave a set of weird UFO-related phenomena unexplained, it also leaves an obvious question open and unanswered. If many stories of insider UFO knowledge originate in the deliberate disinformation projects, and we've been living through a veritable golden age of strange leaks and tales of insider knowledge, then what exactly might this era's particular PSYOP be intended to conceal? That was excellent. That was excellent. That's real reporting. What the Wall Street Journal did was disgusting. And not for what they were saying in it, in the way that they did it, disgusting. And no one should even take it serious, because to me, this guy is saying, look, this is very possible that they set certain things up to have disinformation to lead you away from the cause of technology, and maybe say, well, yeah, it's actually UFO stuff. Follow that trail. It's very possible that that happens, but it doesn't explain the other things that haven't really been touched upon. And don't take what Sean Kirkpatrick is saying seriously, because clearly there's an agenda there. And are you saying that those people who witnessed those things should just say, oh yeah, it's about the electromagnetic pulse. That's what it is. Go about your business now. No, they can't do that, because that's not what they saw. And plus, you didn't get a statement from them. What this guy does here is he presents it of like, well, this is what it potentially could be. But it also could be this, but we really don't have any answers there. So he's presenting it on both sides of like, he's basically saying nothing is really answered here. Like, don't take that Wallstreet Journal thing as a fact of the matter. Oh, case closed, because it's not. There's just too much out there that hasn't been explained. And there are other things. And what he said too is like, how do you know, Wallstreet Journal, if they weren't saying, okay, look, you know what? This is what this is, and this is what we have been doing. So we get you off the case. And it's a disinformation campaign in general. So excellent reporting. This is how you write these things, because he doesn't say he believes in aliens in general. He doesn't say that he doesn't think it is the government trying to put disinformation out there. He says it's very possible that it is. It's very possible that it isn't alien stuff. It's possible that it could be. He presents it in a way of ask the questions. Here are the facts. Here is what this is. And he also shines the light by saying what we've been saying. And that's Sean Kirkpatrick has done this how many times now? 20? Hey, everybody, come listen to my thing. Can we invite them? No, I don't invite them. How about them? Yeah, invite them. Why? Because they're going to say exactly what I need them to say. And how about that? You want to do that podcast? Yeah, I'll do that podcast. Why? Well, because they feel the same way that I do about this, and they're going to get my word out there. Oh, okay. Then let's do that. How about this newspaper? Yeah. But clearly, that the Wall Street Journal was contacted. Those two reporters, and it was. I told you when I was talking about that back then. I said, if they could have won me over immediately, in the same way that this guy just did. In that report, they said, well, this is what Sean Kirkpatrick had told us, and when we reached out to so and so, they had a different thing. They said this, so it's pointing to disinformation that it could be. But when we followed up with these particular people, they claimed this. It wasn't. It was one point of view. And when you're reporting on this stuff, you can't do that. You always have to. Even any single time there's any story, they always say, hey, we reached out to so-and-so for a comment. And they either say no comment, they didn't want to talk. And if you say no comment, if that was in the article where it's like, well, we reached out to some of those people, they didn't want to talk about it. Well, then it's like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like they want to talk about it. Then the Wall Street Journal has to report. But that's not the case. There were many people that wanted to talk to them during this report. So I loved what they did here in the New York Times. This is a big win for the New York Times in my book, because this is to me, okay, we still have more questions to ask. We don't have any answers like the rest of us. So what do you make of this article? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you think that it was good reporting? And does it take away any of the shine to what that Wall Street Journal article had done? Put your thoughts in there. Let me know. All right, guys, thanks again. I appreciate you. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the flip side.